Hi, this is Kogito, and I'm back with another Through the Ages video. I know I said at the end of the previous video that it might be a while before my next World Championship video, because my two-player games were all in their relatively early stages, and then after I said that, my game with Sazmer went really quickly, so because it finished, I am able to do that video now, which is nice to be able to do it now, for sure. For a little background, I neglected to take a screenshot, so I can't show you the standings before this game, but you are able to see them at the end of my previous video. And as you saw there, I am actually for sure going to win this group, because I ended the three-player games 17 points ahead of the second place player, which was Fat Hope. So no matter how the two-player games go, I could lose all my two-player games, Fat Hope could win all their two-player games, and I would still finish first in the group. And I also knew this before the games even started, because we finished our three-player games before the two-player games started. Now, that all being said, there are still 3 reasons for me to want to win these games. First, of course, is the pride reason. You know, I want to win as much as I can. And second is, of course, the Glico rating. As you may know, there's a Glico rating that all tournament Through the Ages players have, and, you know, winning games gets me high on the rating, which, you know, is partly a pride thing, but it also has impacts on, like, seeding in some tournaments and the like. But the third more direct reason to want to win these three-player games is seeding in this tournament, in the World Championships. If I'm not incorrect, the seeding for the next stage, so this is stage 2, so the seeding for stage 3 is going to be determined first. There's going to be in each group a player who's seeded directly into round 3 because of their good performance in last year's World Championship. And then after that, which group you're in will be determined by how well you did in this round. So basically, to sum up, the more points I score in this round, then I'll be matched up against players who scored less points in this round. It'll all be players who got first in their group, so it'll all be very strong players, but, you know, and, you know, obviously, you know, just because someone scored less points in a round doesn't mean they're a less strong player. Maybe they were in a tougher group, you know, maybe they got unlucky, there's a lot of reasons, but, you know, on average, my next round should be slightly easier the better I do in this round. That all being said, I can't deny that going into these games knowing that, like, I could lose them all and still finish first meant that I was perhaps a little less intent on them than I would normally be. I still, you know, spent a fair amount of time on them, but maybe a bit less than I did on the 4- and 3-player games. So maybe, you know, we'll see whether or not that impacted my play in these games, but with that out of the way, let's take a look at this game against Sazmer. So, taking a quick look at the leaders and wonders in a 2-player game, because culture matters so much more than in 3 and especially 4-player, what you first want to look at, I think, is which Age 2 culture leaders there are. And in this game, there are actually all 4 Age 2 culture leaders. Bach and Shakespeare is the major ones, but Darwin and Gotti can definitely both give you a lot of culture too, in the right situations. So this game, I think, is definitely going to be determined by whoever uses their Age 2 culture leader the best. Because there's Darwin, Shakespeare, and Gotti, getting printing presses will also be pretty important. In case you don't know, in 2-player games, there's only 1 copy of journalism, meaning that if you want Shakespeare, Darwin, or Gotti less so, but Shakespeare and Darwin, you really need libraries for them to be good, obviously. And if you take Shakespeare or Darwin, but not a printing press, then your opponent can cut the 1 copy of journalism potentially, thus making your culture leader much worse, or in Shakespeare's case, basically useless. Which means that in 2-player games, especially, like I said, when there are these library leaders in Age 2, you really wanted to get a copy of printing press in Age 1 since you're guaranteed to get one. And also just in general, even without these leaders, it's pretty good to go into printing presses if it's available to you, just because the extra culture they give you is so valuable in 2-player games. I won't get into the full 2-player game theory here, but basically, focusing heavy on culture and culture rushes are a lot more common and powerful in 2-player than they are in other formats. So, with that all out of the way, we can take a look at how the turns go and the game itself. Sazmer, interestingly, passes up the Library of Alexandria and Caesar, which is less interesting to take the Richland. Maybe Sazmer was hoping that I wouldn't take the Acropolis, but spoilers, I will take it. I'll get to that in a bit. I probably just would have taken the Library of Sazmer, but there are also potentially, you know, some powerful, maybe pyramids you could hope to come out of the deck, so I can understand that logic. But yeah, I definitely took the Acropolis. Of course, in any other format, you would snap take the Library of Alexandria here, but in 2-player, I think Acropolis is the best AJ Wonder. And it's maybe not even close. I mean, Pyramids is maybe on the same level as on the same tier as Acropolis, but I think Acropolis is like very clearly the best AJ Wonder in a 2-player game. And just a small spoiler, this game is going to be a great demonstration of why. Age 1 begins. Sazmur builds 1 mine and increases the population, but again does an interesting play. Does not take Boudica, instead takes 2 yellow cards, and not particularly high value yellow cards at that. This play I think is a lot more questionable than taking the Rich Land last turn. I think Boudica is a perfectly, is a very good leader, especially, you know, here there aren't any strength leaders on the road that I can take to interfere with Boudica, so I think not taking Boudica here was definitely a mistake. As for me, though, you know, I now have a choice between Boudica and Confucius. I actually think in a situation like this, Boudica is slightly better than Confucius because you should almost always get her regular bonus, and while you usually take science with it, you do have the option of taking food or rocks in case they happen to be more useful on that particular turn, and there are definitely times where there can be. However, because Boudica is going to be discarded after my turn and Confucius isn't, by taking Confucius I can deny both of these leaders to Sazmur, which was definitely a lot more important than the difference between Boudica and Confucius. So, aside from taking Confucius, I just do usual stuff. Just as a side note, in a game like this where printing presses are so important and I really want to go into printing presses and not build a second lab, the science leaders like Confucius and Boudica and Aristotle to a lesser extent, but still Aristotle, become a lot more important because if you delay your second lab, that can cause some issues, but having the science leader really offsets that. Obviously, having the Acropolis to save me science and governments also offsets me potentially delaying the second lab. I draw a bonus card on the Barbarians. Sazmur takes the Pyramids, and also, you know, I didn't really do it deliberately, but it's also definitely very good to leave the Pyramids on this slot. Just another general Age 2 strategy for you. When a card is left on this spot in particular on the card row for your opponent's turn, they have to either take it or let it be discarded on your turn. So if there's like a really important card for your opponent, if you can, it's really good to leave it on this slot for them, because then they either have to take it for 2 civil actions or not be able to take it at all. So in this case, like I said, it kind of just happened naturally with what I wanted to do anyway. If the Pyramids had been like 1 slot sooner, that would have been a reason to take Boudica, for example, instead of Confucius, to make sure the Pyramids was on this for Sazmur. Regardless, though, like I said, it happened naturally, so that was good, forcing Sazmur to spend an additional civil action on it. They take Hippocrates, but they even delay electing Hippocrates a little bit. Now, it's generally fine to delay electing Hippocrates because he gives you his value in the long term, so you don't necessarily need to elect him immediately, unlike all the other AJ leaders. However, this is round 3 already, so this means that Sazmur is going to wait till round 4 to elect Hippocrates. That, I think, even for Hippocrates, is a little long. I have to choose between seeding Barbarians and the bonus card to get the Confucius Science. I think it definitely has to be Barbarians. A little bit risky because I have a culture-producing wonder and Sazmur doesn't. But I think still seeding the Barbarians is a lot better than seeding but losing the bonus card. And I reveal a development of settlement. So for this turn, I am not in corruption right now, so I don't necessarily have to do anything. Like I said, I could build a second lap this turn. I didn't want to. I wanted to go into printing presses instead, something you generally want to do in 2-player games, but especially when there are these powerful library leaders in Age 2. So because of that, I didn't want to build the second lab, and I also have another good reason not to build the second lab this turn, which is there's this early iron available in the row for me. Next turn, I will have 6 rocks, which means I can potentially play the iron and upgrade it twice. That felt really powerful to me, especially since, again, Confucius is offsetting me delaying the lab. So I really wanted to have this iron. I think it was absolutely worth spending 2 civil actions on. The question is what else to take. Now, one thing, in 2-player especially, you really need to worry about how you're leaving the card row for your opponent. I really didn't want to let this alchemy drop to 1 civil action for Sazmur. Sazmur obviously has 4 science next turn. One potential play for Sazmur is take alchemy, play it, upgrade an alchemy and elect Hippocrates. In fact, that seemed like a pretty strong play for Sasmer. It gets them out of corruption, it develops their civilization more, so I wanted to deny this option to Sasmer, and in order to deny this option, having taken iron, the alchemy will be on here, that slot I mentioned previously, but if I take either this urban growth, or the Silk Road, I can't take the Silk Road, but if I take this urban growth, that would put the alchemy in one civil action, so I really wanted to avoid taking this urban growth, for the same reason I wanted to avoid taking any of these other cards for 2 civil actions, because that would also put the alchemy on 1, meaning that whatever else I do this turn will have to involve either working on my civilization or taking a card from this discard slot. Due to the development of settlement, though, I think that was kind of actually an unfortunate development for me, maybe the worst one in the deck, because it means that I am not able to increase my population this turn. I think normally I would want to spend a civil action increasing my population, because I don't want to work on my civilization, I don't want to build a stage in Acropolis even, because I want to upgrade to iron mines next turn. So because I don't want to spend any rocks, because I can't spend any food, I basically have no choice but to take cards, and because I don't want the alchemy to be available 1 civil action for Sasmer, my only option is to take these 2 cards. Taking the Age A urban growth instead of the Age 1 urban growth, definitely not where you want to be usually, but I think it is absolutely the right decision in this context for reasons already stated. As for the Theocracy, you know, it's kind of an interesting card. This is one of the cards I'm still not entirely sure, like, when it's good. It feels like one of those cards that's kind of underexplored, because it feels like it's very kind of strong inherently in a lot of ways because of all the bonuses it gives you, but of course it's a government that doesn't give you any civil actions, which makes it kind of awkward sometimes. I'm still not entirely sure what to make of it, frankly. However, I do think that one thing that definitely makes it a lot better is having Acropolis, because with the Acropolis, you will only spend, you know, 3 or maybe even 2 science on it. That makes it a lot more justifiable to just have the Theocracy as kind of like a pseudo warfare almost, like basically just like a cheaper warfare that even gives you a bit of extra stuff, and the difference is just the actual military action will go away when you replace it with a government later, but that's also fine. Warfare tends to like lose its value somewhat heading into Age 3 or so anyway. So I do think with Acropolis, Theocracy becomes a lot better. You can sometimes even just take it and then maybe replace it with an Age 2 government or something if that ends up working out. I draw 2 tactics, a medieval army and a heavy cavalry. Sasmer Seeds reveals the development of markets. The development of markets it does let Sasmer finish the pyramids this turn, but as we can see, Sasmer is still, that still means, because I left the alchemy here, if Sasmer takes alchemy, that means they won't be able to elect Hippocrates this turn, and that would definitely take way too long, so I agree that Sasmer, you know, definitely needs to elect Hippocrates this turn, meaning due to me taking this copy of Urban Growth, Sasmer is unable to take this copy of Alchemy. They are instead forced to, in this case, just increase their population. So my last turn was rewarded. As for this turn, I definitely see the heavy cavalry over the medieval army. It's going to be, you know, heavy cavalry if you can get, you know, Theocracy makes it a bit easier to get heavy cavalry going if possible, but it still felt, you know, pretty unlikely, especially when I don't know if there'll be a development of warfare in the deck, so I just seeded it instead of the medieval army. Revealing development of crafts. Because of these 2 rock developments, this actually means that I am able to upgrade the iron mines 3 times this turn, which definitely felt very strong. Now, the cost of doing this is it means I'm not going to be able to take this copy of Knights or like anything else on the road, but it was really Knights that I wanted to take because of the medieval army tactic. So I did think for a while about that. However, you should note that because of all the resource developments that were revealed, if I could not get out of corruption this turn by only upgrading 2 mines. I had to either upgrade all 3, or maybe... So, in order to get out of corruption and take the Knights, I would have had to only upgrade 1 iron mine and then increase my population and build a warrior. And doing that felt really bad. Like, I think, you know, missing out on 1 mine upgrade to take the Knights, I think is definitely justifiable. Missing out on 2 mine upgrades to take the Knights felt a lot, less justifiable. Like, yeah, obviously I need the Knights for my tactic, but, you know, losing out on 2 rocks just to take this felt really bad. So that's why I played this turn this way instead. I drew a Call to Arms and a second bonus card. Sasmer Seeds again, this time revealing development of politics. The cards I drew were a Foray, a bonus card, and a Raiders. Sazuma takes Joan of Arc as their leader, and Alexa. I think Joan of Arc is definitely quite a good leader in 2-player games. However, by electing her this turn, Sazuma is left with only 1 Hippocrates token instead of 2. I think that the bonuses that Joan gives Sazuma are not enough to justify missing out on 1 Hippocrates token. We can also see this is a consequence of Sazuma waiting so long to elect Hippocrates in the first place. But given that happened, I think Sazuma should have waited 1 more turn before electing Joan. Anyway, Sazuma actually builds a temple directly, as well as a warriors. So building a temple directly is definitely a lot more justifiable when you have Joan, because it gives you the strength as well. Sazuma is able to go up to 4 strength for playing the fighting band, a little bit much, at least, but I do obviously have the bonus card, so I'm not at risk of an aggression as of yet. Sazuma also takes a reserves, a rich land, and then plays the cultural heritage. Notably, Sazuma does not take this printing press. As for my turn, I decided to seed the Raiders. I didn't, I'm only going to be able to keep 2 bonus cards anyway. I could have seeded one of the bonus cards. However, I am planning on taking Nostradamus in this game. I'll talk about that a bit more during my turn. And obviously with Nostradamus, Reserves becomes a lot better because Raiders becomes a lot better because Raiders specifically hits the weakest player. I revealed the Barbarians that I had previously seeded. Thankfully, because of the cultural heritage and Joan, Sazuma has more culture than me, so even though I'm weakest, I didn't get hit by it. As for this turn, I could have done various things like play the Theocracy or built a printing press, but the problem is still there are a couple issues with that, or one of them, mainly corruption and the cards that I won in the row. Because there are 2 cards in the row that I really want. One of them is the printing press that I already took. I've already talked about the printing press. And the other card is this irrigation. In 2-player games, irrigation becomes a really important card because there's only 1 copy of selective breeding, along with only 1 copy of coal. That's why in 2-player games especially, irrigation and iron are much more important than alchemy because there's 2 copies of scientific method if you miss out on the alchemy. Also, a lot of the times you only want 1 lab anyway, like I said, because you want libraries. Whereas there's only 1 copy of coal and selective breeding, so if you don't get iron and irrigation, then your opponent can cut whichever one you don't have. So if I didn't take this irrigation, then Sazuma could have taken the 2nd copy of irrigation and then cut the selective breeding from me, and that would be really bad to not get any farm upgrades. It's not impossible to win a game when you don't have any farm upgrades. You can get some population. I mean, there's colonies, there's reserves and stuff like that, so it's not an absolute death sentence, but it does make the game much harder if you don't have farm upgrades. So that's why I really want this irrigation, and accelerate the printing press. And if I'm taking these 2 cards, the only good way I really have of getting out of corruption is finishing my wonder. So I think this turn is pretty set. I did play my medieval army. While it is a bit of a tell, maybe this will cause Sazuma to take a knights when they wouldn't have otherwise, just to cut it from me. I wanted to have it in the play. I wanted to keep 2 bonus cards in my hand in case a colony was seeded. So I think overall this turn, there's not really many other options. Unfortunately, this does mean that I won't get an Age 1 Wonder, which especially with my early irons, like an Age 1 Wonder might be really good. But there's still, there's the Himeji Castle will also be discarded after my turn, but maybe I'll be able to get this Machu Picchu, or maybe I'll find other ways to spend my extra resources. Ideally, I would have liked to take the Great Wall, but like I said, I think these 2 texts are just way too important to not take. And I draw another bonus card, which is funny. Sazuma Seeds reveals a developed territory. With all my bonus cards, so this was seeded by Sazuma, but I am able to win this territory. And only 1 warrior, which is nice. Oh, I forgot to talk about Nostradamus last turn, but yeah, I think I didn't really have the leeway to take Eleanor anyway, and also, I think Eleanor is a strong leader in 2-player games. I think maybe especially, when I'm on Theocracy, because she gives those extra civil actions when you replace her, but I didn't really have the leeway to take a last turn, and Nostradamus is also a very strong leader. Sazuma ends up taking the Himeji Castle, which gave me more hopes that I might be able to get Machu Picchu, and they interestingly build another mine using their rich land to do it. So 4 mines. I mean, I think I will say this. I do think that the fourth mine is somewhat of an underexplored topic in Through the Ages. I think, you know, a lot of people know about the third farm, and definitely a third farm is something I should be building more often, frankly. That can definitely be very good. A fourth mine, I'm having a bit of a harder time deciding. I think there are definitely times when it's good and you want to do it, but I'm currently not super clear on when those times might be. So for that reason, I'm not going to judge that really too harshly, because I do think it's an underexplored topic and, like, Through the Ages theory, shall we say. As for me, you know, all I can do is seed that. Well, I don't because I spent those other 2 bonus cards, I don't necessarily have to seed this last one. You know, seeding this last one is definitely a cost, because it means that, I won't have a bonus card in my hand, but I figured, you know, I don't have knowledge of any colonies other than the one that was just revealed, and seeding it gives me an extra science for sure, which, especially because of how long I've delayed my science buildings, is especially useful, so I figured might as well just seed it. I reveal my Confucius event, the Heavy Cavalry. Now is the turn that I can finally build the printing press. So I end up electing Nostradamus this turn. I think that, that, though, might have been a mistake. I didn't have to do it this turn. There'll be one more turn in Age 1, so electing Nostradamus this turn basically costs me a science. Now, Nostradamus may get me an extra 3 culture if I seed with him next turn in case I draw an event, but obviously it's not known for sure whether I'll draw an event. That being said, though, okay, I guess, one reason I did play Nostradamus is obviously my hand is empty. So we can see on my turn, I'm going to build a warrior. I increased my population. I didn't want any of these cards. I didn't need the theology, especially after winning this territory, and also with the Acropolis. I won't need any happy face buildings other than dramas or operas in this game, because I can just build a bunch of those with the Acropolis. So I didn't want this theology or this alchemy, so that's why I just increased my population. So I guess, yeah, I did kind of need to elect Nostradamus this turn, because otherwise I would have only been able to draw 1 card. I needed to, unfortunately, I wasn't able to play the Theocracy this turn, because that would have left me in corruption. As we can see, I needed to increase my population to get out of corruption. And I could have gone out of corruption by not using that Age A urban growth when I built the library. I wanted to build the library this turn to get my science production going. But I could have not used the yellow card and then played the Theocracy this turn anyway, without being in corruption. I could have also built 2 warriors, but yeah, no, I couldn't have without popping, yeah. So kind of to do the major things I wanted to do this turn, namely build the library while using the urban growth yellow cards. That would leave me with only 1 draw with 2 strength behind Sazmar, meaning if Sazmar has an aggression, which seems pretty likely because of all the cards they've drawn, then there's a very high chance that they would try that aggression against me, especially with how many bonus cards I revealed that I had drawn on the colony, and that I know I've drawn a ton of bonus cards. The chances of me drawing a bonus card are extremely slim. So there's a good chance Sazma could have gotten a successful aggression against me if I hadn't elected Nostradamus this turn specifically. So yeah, I think I basically had no choice. It was kind of a choice between maybe 1 rock and 1 science. Maybe it would have been better to build the library without using the yellow cards and then not increase my population and just play the Theocracy this turn and kept Confucius, because then I would have drawn 2 cards and I would have been guaranteed to defend against Sazmar. Now, Sazmar maybe could have aggressed to get rid of those cards, meaning I wouldn't have been able to seed with Confucius anyway, so I wouldn't have gotten that extra science. But then that aggression, you know, that would have cost Sazmar some draws at least, so even looking back, I'm not sure if electing Confucius this turn was the right decision or not. Anyway, I at least do look out, and I draw a seedable event with Nostradamus, which I was happy to see. Sazmar seeds, and this time I did actually note down the cards that Sazmar seeded while I have Nostradamus. So this card that Sazmar seeded is a wealthy territory. Sazmar reveals an inhabited territory. Unfortunately, because I lost all those bonus cards, I was only able to bid 1 on this territory. So Sazmar kind of got the better of the colony bidding so far. Although, maybe that's just because I got lucky in drawing a bunch of bonus cards and Sazmo didn't. Anyway, Sazmo takes the iron, is able to upgrade once, but it isn't willing to upgrade a second one. Instead, wants to build a warrior with the extra 2 civil actions, though they are able to take this cartography. You know, we saw that they had seeded the wealthy territory, so it's definitely understandable. I mean, they do have to spend 2 civil actions on it. They probably didn't want me to have it. My science is going to be a little pressed, though, especially after I play the theocracy and the irrigation. So maybe they could have, and I only have 4 civil actions, so maybe they could have not taken it and thought that maybe I wouldn't take it, but especially with them having ceded the territory, especially with Sazmo knowing that I know that they ceded the territory, I can understand why they wanted to make sure to have the cartography. Despite Sazmo having the cartography, I did cede the, I did cede my strategic territory, partly because obviously, you know, I knew that this wealthy territory, you know, that I saw was ceded is immediately revealed, so I wanted to reveal it on my turn to at least force Sazmo to put a little more into it. And also, obviously, getting that extra 3 culture from Nostradamus is a very nice upside to seeding. And also because I know that there's a Raiders in here that I wanted to potentially reveal while Sazmo was weakest. But it is the wealthy territory that Sazmo expectedly is able to win for, at least they have to spend the bonus card on this one because it was revealed on my turn. Now is the time when I can finally play that theocracy. I did want to have it to get more draws to potentially seed with Nostradamus. I am also able to upgrade one of my farms, but I am not able to upgrade a second farm and stay out of corruption, even if I had built a warrior. The only way I can get out of corruption is by popping and then building a second warrior. So overall, you know, I could have tried to take the monarchy instead, but I mean, I already had the theocracy in my hand, and I wouldn't have been able to play both the monarchy and the irrigation this turn either. So I think this turn is probably right. Unfortunately, I don't draw an event to seed. Instead, I draw a fighting band and another bonus card. Is that the, isn't that the 5th bonus card that I've drawn? I think so. Anyway, Sazmo is able to finish the Himeji Castle and upgrade another mine and another mine with that reserves. That is all that they can do on their turn, but that seems like a good turn to me. H2 begins. I'm not able to seed. I do want to take this Code of Laws, though. As we can see, I am planning on building another library this turn, which will enable me to potentially play the Code of Laws this turn. It's a really important card in 2-player because of how important denying cards or manipulating the card row for your opponent is. So any civil actions you can get are really valuable, and it's especially important for me because I'm on Theocracy. So, and like I said, I do want to build a second library. This would leave me with exactly 6 science next turn to be able to play the Code of Laws. And then in order to get out of corruption, I can just increase my population. I don't play the fighting band this turn because I'm not the weakest on Sazmo's turn anyway, due to Nostradamus, so I didn't have to. There was no pressing reason to get up to 5 strength. I also didn't necessarily want to put a 3rd population into warriors anyway. I'm leaving the knights on 2 civil actions for Sazmo, meaning that if Sazmo wants to cut the knights from me, they will at least have to pay a pretty significant price for it. So I figured there was a decent chance I would be able to get the knights next turn for the medieval army tactic, and I didn't want to put build a 3rd warrior for that reason either. I also wanted to maximize my draw so that I could hopefully seed with Nostradamus next turn. I draw a Hussar's tactic, an Iconoclasm, and a Wealthy Territory. So all of these, I guess I should talk about them now. Obviously, getting an H2 tactic so early is a very nice boon. There are 2 copies of Cavalryman in an H2 deck, so I will definitely be able to get one of them. For the Hussar's tactic, the Wealthy Territory, kind of an awkward card with Sazmo having the cartography, but, you know, maybe Sazmo won't have a chance to play the cartography, at least not anytime soon. They probably want, like, a government and other stuff soon, so they might not have a chance to play it. We'll see. The Iconoclasm, always a very interesting card. We'll talk about that on my next turn, though. Sazmo doesn't see it. Instead, they take the Machu Picchu. Interesting decision. They probably mostly wanted to cut it from me because I might struggle to spend my rocks in the next couple turns. The Machu Picchu would have been a pretty good way for me to, a pretty good thing for me to invest my rocks in that doesn't cost the science that I don't have a lot of So I can understand Sasma taking it, even though usually you don't want to take two wonders of the same age like this unless you have Michelangelo. But I can understand the logic in this scenario. There also isn't the best suite of H2 wonders in this deck. I mean, Statue of Liberty and Harvard College are both good, and these two wonders are also better than usual in two-player game. So I think maybe this is a mistake, but I also understand the denial value to me, so I think it's not a mistake, just a decision. Sasmar builds a second warrior. At least they're still not weaker than me, and one stage of the Machu Picchu to be civil action efficient. At least that means they don't take the copy of Knights. I end up seeding the Iconoclasm. I want to seed one of these to get Nostradamus culture, and the Wealthy Territory is risky. I only have this one H1 bonus card right now, Sasmar's the Cartography. I'm almost certainly not going to have enough science to play the navigation myself. So seeding the colony felt a bit risky. Iconoclasm is of course a risky card in its own right, but I think since I know it's coming, I will be able to better prepare for it, potentially than my opponent. I was also thinking that before I seeded, I was planning on taking Bach this turn, because Sasma did not take the printing presses. So Bach should be the best H2 leader for Sasmar. And by taking it myself, Sasmar is going to be forced into an H2 leader that wants libraries more. Maybe I'll be able to cut the journalism too, potentially. But even if I don't, it would at least take Sasmar extra effort to take and play the journalism and stuff like that. So I was originally planning on taking Bach. Bach provides a pretty significant amount of his value sort of just saving science on playing opera, and then being able to get cheaper operas by, for example, in my case, I could upgrade my AJ lab to an opera, because I didn't want it anyway, and I could, build libraries instead for my science. So I was thinking maybe I could play Bach, and, be relatively happy to, get my value out of Bach by building 2 or 3 operas with him, and then even if he dies off after that, while losing the extra culture from him definitely hurts, at least I still got value from him. So that was also part of my logic of seeding Iconoclasm along with the general, when you know it's coming, you're able to prepare for it better, and also feeling that the Wealthy Territory was too likely to be won by Sasmar. However, the event that was revealed kind of changed my plans because the new deposits was revealed. So okay, as you can see, I ended up deciding against Bach. So we can see the issue with Bach here is, if I take Bach and the drama, which I think was my original plan, was to take Bach and drama and accept the corruption. This time, if I did that, I would have to, even building a third warrior would not take me out of corruption, right? Because it would only spend 1 blue token. So I would have to eat 4 corruption to take Bach plus drama. That felt really bad. So right now, I mean, I have so many rocks. Obviously, Sasmar, we can see Sasmar knowing about the new deposits is also surely one reason Sasmar took the Machu Picchu. But that means I now have a ton of rocks that I have to spend, and at the moment, no good way to spend them, because there's no wonder on the road for me. However, there is one card on the road that's potentially a great way to spend rocks, which is the Opera. As I said before, I'm not going to go too deeply into two-player strategy and why this is the case. For now, you'll just have to, if you don't know already, just take it as a given. In two-player, pushing culture is the #1 strategy, to just do a culture rush and push culture hard. It's a lot harder for opponents to catch up with military or economy in a 2-player game than it is in a 3 or especially 4-player game. And so for that reason, while unfortunately I'm missing 1 science to build an opera this turn, next turn I will be able to I will have enough rocks and free population to potentially build 2 operas. And that seemed like a really great way for me to get out of my corruption issue. And so because of that, I felt that the opera was a really important card for me to have, especially it being this early. Who knows when the second copy, there's 2 copies of opera, but who knows when the second copy will be available. And so I didn't want to let Sasmar have this and cut it from me. Again, I felt if I took Bach and the drama, then I would eat 4 corruption. If I took Bach and then, for example, increase my population, or maybe built a 3rd library or something, then the drama would be discarded on Sasmar's turn, and Sasmar could cut the opera from me. Then we would have Bach. Who knows when the opera would show up? I would still have all these rocks and no good way to spend them. So because I felt that the opera was by far the best way to spend my rocks available to me on the row, I really wanted to make sure I had it. And of course, now because I took the Opera, that means I don't have the civil actions to take back. That being said, there is also Darwin on the row, a leader that I am set up quite well for. So for that reason, I thought it was probably fine to take Bach, to not take Bach, because even if I miss out on Bach, I'll be able to get this other strong culture leader in Darwin, and still at least compete with, if not overtake Sesmer in culture. Oh yeah, I forgot to do the beginning of age 2 thing for us, but you can see right now our culture, which is more important than usual in 3-player, is roughly equal. Sasmer has more science on hand than me, but I have a little bit more science production. Sasmer has a bit more rock production, and, you know, more of these wonders. However, I, very importantly, have the Acropolis, and along with the Acropolis, I have these printing presses going. Sasmer has culture production from their wonders, mainly, and Jean, whereas I already have these libraries going. So I think in a 2-player game, having Acropolis plus these libraries is more important than the advantages that Sasmer had. Anyway, with this Opera, this will mean that next turn I can start to significantly pump my culture production and hopefully establish a pretty substantial lead on Sasmer in the coming turns, no matter which leader I get. So with that in mind, I'm not going to be able to avoid corruption entirely this turn, but I can at least get out of the -4 corruption by upgrading a farm. Now, this does mean I pass up on this Knights. However, I thought that was okay because I have this Hussards tactic, so I would prefer the Cavalryman anyway. There's 2 copies of Cavalryman, so I'll be able to get one at some point. I wasn't too worried about my strength situation in the short term either because I have Nostradamus, so I figured it was fine to pass up these Knights. I also kind of had to if I wanted to get out of corruption because I needed to upgrade the farm and increase my population to get out of corruption. I decided to play the Fighting Band tactic. This does cost me a draw, which is unfortunate, but at least I have this wealthy territory, so even if I don't draw another event, I will have an event I can seed with Nostradamus. Again, a risky one since Sasmer has cartography, but at least it is an event that I probably would still see just because that 3 culture is so important in 2-player games. And I think I played the Fighting Band mainly because I know there's... I had seen the strategic territory, right? So I know there's at least 1 more colony coming, and having this tactic, you know, because I have Hussars, I'm planning to not, you know, I want to get rid of these warriors at some point anyway, and the Fighting Band will make my bidding potential in colony battles a bit higher. And I mean, this 1 point can definitely make the difference between winning and losing the colony. I draw a bonus card, which is good for colony bidding as well as an aggression. Sasmer is able, you know, I think the Republic was on the row. I wasn't really in a position to take it for reasons already stated, which means that Sasmer is able to take it. You know, I could have tried cutting the Republic from Sasmer, but like at some point, like there's only so many cards you can cut when you have 4 civil actions, and I just thought the Opera was more important. It does mean that Sasmer is able to increase the civil actions by quite a bit, which is especially good in 2-player, so I think I definitely didn't consider cutting Republic as much as I should have. As I stated earlier, I maybe didn't spend quite as much time on this game as I normally would because I knew I was winning the group regardless. I still think in retrospect the Opera is more important just because it's a way for me to spend my rocks. But that does mean that Sasmer gets this early Republic. That's really good for them. They also take drama with Bach. I think that's the right decision to make. Bach certainly is the H2 leader that they're by far the best set up for. They also take the 2nd copy of Irrigation so that I can't cut the selective breeding from them, as well as increase their population, and build a warrior, and then play the Legion tactic, which means that they tie my strength even with the Nostradamus bonus, which is notable because there's a Raiders in the deck. However, this still isn't enough for them to avoid corruption. And we can see here one of the weaknesses of building this 4th mine, which is it does make it a lot harder for you to avoid corruption. I guess Sasmer built it because they have the new deposits, so I do understand that, but I'm not sure with this corruption now, the 2nd mine has lost a fair amount of the value it otherwise would have given. This 4th mine has lost some of the value it would have given Sasmer. Anyway, I see the wealthy territory, you know, not only to get the bonus from Nostradamus, but because I'm not planning on increasing my strength this turn, so I really wanted to reveal the Raiders here when it would hit Sasmer. Unfortunately, the Raiders is the last card in the deck, and I reveal my Confucius event instead with the bonus card. I do still want to build 2 operas to both jumpstart my culture production. Now I'm going to be at +10, which is a significant amount ahead of Sasmer. And it's also just barely enough to get me out of corruption, which is nice. And that leaves me with 1 civil action left. It does mean I can't play the Code of Laws, but I do believe that's worth it because it lets because again, it's just gets me out of corruption, gets my culture production going, and it still leaves me with 1 civil action left, with which I can take Darwin. I think, you know, Gotti. I think Darwin right now provides as much culture as Gotti would, and I've already played my urban building text, so Gotti's science discount wouldn't matter. So Darwin just seemed clearly better. I could try waiting for Shakespeare, but one of the main value of Shakespeare is in the discounts he gives you for these theaters and libraries. And again, I've already played the opera. I've already built 2 operas. So the leaders like Gotti and Shakespeare that help you build urban buildings in the first place have kind of lost all their value. So instead, I definitely wanted to have this leader Darwin, who you know, doesn't let you build the buildings already, but I've already built them, and instead is much better after you've built them because of the civil action discount he gives you on text you take. I could have potentially elected Darwin this turn, but I think I wanted to have full knowledge of this event deck. I know the 3 cards that I seeded, so I figured if Sasmer seeds on their turn while I have Nostradamus, I'll at least know what all these cards in the event deck are. If I draw an event to seed with Nostradamus, he will give me as much culture as Darwin would, right? And in addition, maybe Sasmer doesn't have an event to seed, and if that's the case, and Sasmer doesn't build strength, and that means if I seeded on my turn with Nostradamus, then the Raiders would hit Sasmer. So I think for all those reasons, it is right not to play Darwin this turn. Yeah, even though I am risking not drawing a seedable event and losing out on 3 culture. I discarded the aggression. I wanted to keep these cards. I didn't want to play the Hussars because I wanted to maximize my chances of drawing an event to seed. The aggression looks like it'll very likely not be usable anyway. I do draw 2 events. Unfortunately, they're both colonies, so risky with the cartography, but at least they are events. Sasmer seeds for the 2nd time when I have Nostradamus, so this one is the historic territory. So there's going to be a lot of colonies coming in this game. Unfortunately, the Raiders is revealed on Sasmer's turn, so it does hit me. Sasmer is able to finish the Machu Picchu and elects box so that they can start building operas. Right now, though, they are only able to build 1 opera because they don't have free population. They could have transformed a laboratory into an opera, but that would have cost them science. So I agree, this is probably better to just get farm production going anyway. And also, they get a strong yellow card anyway with the final civil action, which is this breakthrough. They're kind of suffering for science as much as I am, more than I am currently. I did want to seed with Nostradamus, so I decided to seed, that was the developed territory. It was kind of a difficult decision which territory to seed, but I felt the historic territory was just a bit too swingy for my tastes. Right now, I am the culture lead. Before my turn ends, I'm 13 culture ahead of Sasmer. After my turn ends, I will be at least 23 culture ahead. And so, for that reason, I felt that I was currently, you know, Sasmer does have the advantage, of course, in civil actions than in military actions, but I also have the Acropolis. So overall, I felt like I was in a pretty good position in this game, and I didn't want to risk, you know, historic territory is really swingy in 2-player games because it's a 22 culture swing. The developed territory is also obviously potentially very strong, but I felt not quite as much so. Anyway, I reveal a strategic territory because this was one I seeded. Because it's revealed before Sasmer plays the cartography, I am actually able to win it. I decided to, instead of sending away this bonus card, I know there are more colonies coming, and my tactic doesn't require infantry anyway, so I decided to just send both of them away. We can see the value of that fighting band tactic I played earlier. Off of the strategic territory, I draw an Annex, I draw a Ravages of Time, which I definitely don't want to see, but I am thankful to have drawn it because it means that I know it's not in the deck and I can keep my Acropolis around, and I also draw a Crime Wave. I decided to go ahead. I did want to rebuild my Cavalryman this turn because, again, I know there are colonies coming. Unfortunately, while I am planning on replacing Nostradamus, it's because I have full knowledge of this event deck, so I know there are, in fact, no strength events in this event deck, but there are colonies, So while I don't have to be stronger than Sazmer, I do need to have a unit around so that I can at least compete in colony bidding. So that was important for me. As for my last civil action, I decided to this time elect Darwin. You know, I think it's a little debatable whether it might be better to keep Nostradamus around just for a little bit of extra event knowledge. But I decided that and also I'm not going to be taking a tech this turn. I mean, I did consider taking the journalism, but I thought that once I get 6 science, I'm going to be spending it on the Code of Laws because I'll need to before the age ends, and so who knows when I'll be able to play the journalism anyway. I mean, maybe I should have taken it though, just to cut it from Sazmer, because after Sazmer builds 3 dramas, then they'll be topped out in terms of theaters they can build with their urban building limit. But if they have the journalism, they could start building journalism. So actually, looking back on it now, I think that I should have taken this journalism instead, purely to cut it from Sazmer, and that would have justified playing Darwin. But I didn't. Instead, I took the urban growth. That, yeah. In retrospect, I think this was definitely a mistake, and I absolutely should have taken the journalism, you know, more or less, mainly as a denial to Sazmer. I guess I kind of, I mean, like I said, I think there's another consequence of not spending as much time on the turns. But looking back, yeah, taking the journalism would have been right. I play the Hussars to get it out of my hand because I wanted to keep the bonus card, and there was no reason to hide it either at this point. I didn't necessarily need to draw cards anymore because I replaced Nostradamus. So I decided to ditch the events I was that I was pretty confident. Like I said, I didn't want the Ravagers in the deck. The colonies still felt risky. So I just kept the Crime Wave because, you know, with my tactic, I could potentially certainly be ahead of Sazmer in strength. And for that reason also, I kept the Spy just in case, you never know. And I drew Mobile Artillery Tactic, normally a great tactic, but I almost certainly will not be playing it because I don't have enough science for cannons, probably. Sazmer increases the population, gets 3 theaters going by upgrading a lab to the drama, and also takes a scientific method, takes that journalism, naturally, as well as a cannon. And builds another warrior so they can be ahead of me in strength. I decided to save the Crime Wave. Again, I know the cards are on the deck and that they're not strength events, but there are colonies, so I did want to reveal colony on my turn to have the advantage in bidding. And I do reveal colony, this historic territory. 5, unfortunately, is the maximum I can bid, so Sazmer is able to win this colony. At least it costs them 2 warriors to do so. As for my turn, I did have a couple options here, you know, but I didn't really want to take any of these techs necessarily. I mean, the strategy could definitely be good, but as a denial to Sazmer again, so that's maybe something I could consider further. But also, Sazmer doesn't have much science protection themselves. They will get more with journalism, another reason I should have got the journalism. But even so, it might take Sazmer a while before playing the strategy anyway. And furthermore, I saw a really good card that I could take, which is the Statue of Liberty. The basic issue I saw was that the next population I have, the next time I pop right, I'm going to be in this part of the yellow bank, and it'll start taking me a lot longer to get free population, and I really wanted more, especially with a crop list. I really wanted more operas, right? The second cavalryman, stuff like that. And so the Statue of Liberty, giving me all these yellow tokens, is especially strong for me here when I'm on irrigation. It means that even after the age ends, I'll very easily be able to get 2 more free population, and it'll also be easier, you know. It'll also take longer to exhaust this part of the yellow bank. So the Statue of Liberty just felt really strong for me for that reason. And also the culture gives me, certainly not insignificant, the Acropolis will make it a lot easier for me to get a potential Age 3 government form, which would start, and the Statue of Liberty would start giving me 3 culture a turn there, which is pretty powerful in 2-player. So for both of those reasons, it just seemed like the most powerful thing for me to do on my turn. It also doesn't take any cards from the row, which means even with the Republic, it'll be very difficult for Sazmer to end the age before my turn, so I should be able to play this Code of Laws. I draw 2 aggressions and a bonus card, no events, unfortunately. Sazmer does take the strategy, builds an opera, and takes a rifleman, and refills their tactic by destroying the lab. So a pretty significant cost to refill this tactic, but I guess they presumably, you know, It is true that they only had 2 military actions, right? So if they didn't fulfill this and they were stuck on 4 strength, I mean, they could have still used the Magic Castle to defend against an aggression from me. Potentially, this only ties them in strength with me and doesn't exceed it. So if this is a strength event that I don't know about, I would still be able to win it on my turn. That being said, it does prepare them to potentially succeed on their turn if we're tied in strength, and also, like I said, it means that I can't aggress against them. They wouldn't be forced to sack a warrior if I aggressed against them. But it is a significant cost to destroy the lab for it, for sure. But they probably would rather their population go into the library and not the lab anyway. But yeah, this does mean, like I said, the age doesn't end, so I am able to play this Code of Laws. None of these cards I really wanted. You know, I would rather put my population into urban buildings and not these wonders. So I just went ahead and built a 3rd opera. I could have built a library instead. However, as we know, one of these cards is in fact an iconoclasm. And so even though the library would be only 1 less culture per turn with Darwin is not going to be alive for much longer as soon as the iconoclasm gets revealed. And so, for that reason, I prioritized building the opera instead. Just to get more culture going. I could have built a 3rd library, but again, I kind of felt like this population, I would rather it go either to fulfill my tactic up, or to build a 4th opera with the Acropolis. I don't need to fill the tactic yet, because again, I know these are strength events. So I decided to take the Frugality. This is also definitely going to be a powerful card for me, because I'm going to want as much population as I can get to get as many urban buildings as I can get. The only card I keep this on a bonus card is the Spy. Again, you know, just in case, you never know. It seemed like the most powerful potential aggression. And I draw Refugees, another bonus card, so at least I'll be able to build a lot for those colonies, as well as an Infiltrate. Age 3 begins. Before Sazmar's turn, we can take a look at our situations. Now it's becoming a bit clearer what's going on. Sazmar, our science production is roughly the same. Sazmar has more rock production than I do, and more food production thanks to the Machu Picchu. Sazmar also has a lot more civil actions than me. So Sazmar definitely has a much stronger economy than I do. However, I have a lot more culture than Sazmar does. Our production is actually relatively similar, at least for now, thanks to Bach. But because I was able to get my culture production going faster than Sazmar, I have 25 more culture than Sazmar does as the current point in time. So I was feeling relatively confident. 25 culture, you know, definitely you can catch up, so the game is far from over, and Sazmar does have the economic advantage to potentially try to catch up peacefully even. But I do currently have the culture advantage, and it's on Sazmar to find a way to overtake me. Sazmar does siege, reveals a wealthy territory. I am actually able to win this, thanks to all my bonus cards. Sazmar does build a 2nd library, takes some yellow cards with their extra civil actions, as well as a cavalryman and architecture. This does kind of stuff their hand, but I mean, they can easily play the Rev idea and the Wave of Nationalism to empty their hand a little bit, so I think this is fine. And so me, I decide not to cede, because I wanted this iconoclasm to be revealed on... I know this is iconoclasm, and I wanted it to be revealed on Sazmar's turn. Because basically, if the iconoclasm is revealed on my turn, then it means there was 1 turn cycle where Sazmar got extra culture from their leader, and I didn't. So I wanted the iconoclasm to be revealed on Sazmar's turn, so that we would have an equal amount of turns of getting culture from our leader. But again, because I know the iconoclasm is coming, I did want to prioritize the operas over the printing presses, although I am still even able to build a 3rd printing press because I know exactly what this event is. I had no need to rebuild the cavalryman yet, so I prioritized just getting as much culture as possible instead. I am also able to take this Air Forces. You know, I figured that because we can see if my culture lead over Sazmar is actually growing, I felt that I didn't want to give Sazmar the opportunity to potentially, you know, get some military going against me, maybe threaten a war. There are 2 copies of Air Forces in a 2-player game, but, you know, the 2nd copy might be at the end of the deck, so I wanted to make sure both to have it for myself and to make sure Sazmar doesn't get an early one. There also wasn't really any other cards I particularly wanted to take. I could have taken the Urban Growth, maybe, but, you know, I can't build another opera yet until I get an Age 3 government, and I don't really need the urban growth to build a printing press, So instead I just took the patriotism, because right now, you know, my next thing that I'm going to invest in is going to be a cavalryman and not the printing press anyway, so the patriotism is going to be more immediately useful for me, and I didn't want any of these other techs other than the air forces. Just go to the infiltrate. Maybe I could have kept it, but again, I know that iconoclasm is coming, so the spy still felt probably more useful. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'm not getting an aggression off, but I think maybe I should have discarded the spy and not the infiltrate. What I draw is another bonus card. I've drawn a ton of bonus cards this game, as well as an impact of happiness and an impact of wonders. This is a bad impact for me, but this is a good impact for me. Sazmar Seeds, thankfully, revealing that iconoclasm. So now that does cost Sazmar 2 more culture. Well, I had 4, so right now it's costing Sazmar 1 more culture per turn than me, but that's still, you know, any little bit counts. Sazmar plays the architecture in order to play another library, takes some multimedia to be able to get some more culture going, and an urban growth, and then finishes opening their minds. I think this I do disagree with. I think I can see, you know, I do think this extra mine ended up providing them with, it did certainly provided positive rock value over the game, but I think it's kind of exhausted its usefulness. Sazmar needs population right now a lot more than they need rocks, so I think Sazmar should have destroyed this mine, planning to put it into something else. Although it is true that they are maxed out on urban buildings anyway, so maybe there was not anything else they necessarily wanted to put the population in. It's my turn. Now I know there are colonies here, so I definitely wanted to rebuild my cavalryman in order to prepare for those colonies that are coming, with the patriotism, obviously. So that leaves me with 3 civil actions left, and 1 card that I really wanted was democracy. Unfortunately, I can't quite play it this turn, but I really, first of all, didn't want Sazmar to have it, and I also really wanted it for myself. I will, with it, not only will it give me +5 culture per turn, thanks to the, well, okay, +4, because this is giving me 1, but it's giving me +4 culture per turn, thanks to the Statue of Liberty, but it'll also let me build a 5th opera, which is going to be extremely powerful, so I really wanted it for myself, too. And with my last civil action, I took the efficient upgrade. I didn't really, maybe I should have taken the patriotism instead in retrospect, but I figured, you know, Sazmar took the first copy of multimedia, but the second copy is on the row. It seemed pretty likely that I would take this copy of multimedia, and obviously this would let me get those multimedias going a lot easier, so. And as for the cards I keep, I wanted to keep these bonus cards for the colonies, and the one event I kept is the impact of happiness, which is a positive impact for me. I didn't want to seed it on my turn, though, because when my turn began, I didn't have any units, so Sazmar would have been able to win any colonies for only 1 warrior, which I definitely didn't want to have happen. I draw a tactic I'm not going to use, and a war and aggression I'm probably not going to use, so a pretty bad draw here for me. Sazmar Seeds reveals the crime wave, unfortunately, hits me while I'm weakest, so I lose 3 culture from it. In a blue token, Sazmar upgrades all of their libraries to multimedias and takes some movies that are going to let them get some further upgrades, as well as a fundamentalism to potentially maybe threaten a war at some point in this game. And I guess they didn't want to have these leaders, which is justifiable because, you know, we're both aiming for these 2 culture leaders, right? So there wasn't a better card for them to take. It's my turn. I did see my impact. I wanted to reveal the colony on my turn, and it's a good impact for me. I revealed that developed territory that I had ceded, and I was actually able to win this, so maybe I should have ceded that historic territory after all. But developed territory is also definitely good for me because I'm missing some culture as well, and the yellow tokens are going to be good for me. But I am, I am extremely fortunate to have gotten Marlena revealed on my turn. I think Sazmar definitely would have taken her if she had been revealed on Sazmar's turn, but she is significantly better than, well, I guess not, yeah, she's significantly better than Fleming would have been, I think, because I'm going to have 5 operas with her, and she's going to be doubling my tactic, so just really, really good. I can play her, I can play the democracy this turn. I have to play the democracy before building my 5th opera, unfortunately, but, you know, that's how it is. That leaves me with 1 civil action left. And this was kind of an interesting question for me. So I did not have knowledge of this event. This was seeded by Sazmar. And I had basically 2 options that I was considering. I think 5th opera is just way too good with Marlena, giving me 30 culture production, which is quite a lot. But with my last civil action now, after doing all of those things, I have to choose I think the most obvious thing is just to take this multimedia. Next turn I can play it, start upgrading it with the efficient upgrade to get even more culture production, you know, sort of ensure that I'll have a lot more culture production than Sazmer, forcing them to try to war me to win. However, at this point we can see that I'm 9 ahead of Sazmer before my production, so I'm actually going to be 39 culture ahead of Sazmer after my turn, thanks to all of the operas that I have built. And 39, it felt to me that, like, it was gonna be almost impossible for Sazmer to come back peacefully with a 39 culture deficit, and that culture deficit growing more every turn too. So I felt that if Sazmer was going to win this game, it was going to have to be through military. So I thought that maybe instead of investing science, I'll get the science back, but instead of investing a lot of rocks into multimedias, when I probably wouldn't need them to win, I would instead be better served by just worrying a bit about my military situation. In addition, like I said, I didn't know which card this was. It could be a colony. There are other colonies I hadn't seen, obviously, and it could be a strength event. So I felt that instead of taking the multimedia, it was safer to destroy this lab and build a cavalryman, which, thanks to Marlena's tactic doubling, means that I'm now going to be strongest on Sazmer's turn, and I'm going to have a unit to put into the colony bidding. So that was my logic, that that Sazmer can't win peacefully, so I was better served by worrying more about my military situation and also maybe bidding for potential colonies. And that's why I passed upon this multimedia. We will see how that decision works out for me. And I draw another aggression, but at least I draw a good tactic. If I get this copy of rockets, this will be a very strong tactic for me, potentially. So I felt pretty confident that Sazmer couldn't war me now either. However, the card is not actually a colony or strength event. Instead, it's a terrorism that Sazmer is able to win. So that's definitely a great event for them. And now, while I was lucky that Marlena was revealed on my turn, Sazmer was lucky in that the Hollywood was revealed on their turn. By, you know, certainly a lot more powerful than the internet, so that's a pretty big swing that Sazmer was able to get the Hollywood. Definitely worth to take it. At least it means that Sazmer will have to eat corruption for it, though. I don't have any events to seed, so instead, I decided to just, you know, again, push closer as possible. I take this engineering genius, aiming to get an internet, and that'll help a little with that, obviously. I also take an urban growth and the rockets for my tactic, right? I also take the endowment because when Sazmer finishes the Hollywood, I will have less culture than them on my turn, so I will be able to use this endowment. It also makes sure that Sazmer can't take it, so that's a 12 culture swing, which is quite a lot in a two-player game especially. And I take a revolutionary idea. I mean, I take all these cards. I don't want any more technologies other than this rocket, so I felt that I had no reason not to just take all these yellow cards, and I can get out of corruption by building a 5th opera, rebuilding my 5th opera right after the terrorism destroyed it, and then I just increased my population. You know, this does cost me 1 food to increase my population now, but I didn't have any, you know, want this mech ag, I didn't have anything else to do with my civil action, and I will still be able to increase my population 1 more time in 2 turns. I draw an aggression, a bonus card, but at least I draw a potentially suitable impact for me because of Marlena's tactic doubling and me having this, what's this tactic called? Sorry. Mechanized army. It seems actually pretty likely that I should be able to win this impact of strength, so that's a good draw. Sazmer Seas reveals an impact of architecture, that this was Sazmer's impact. It's at least a relatively even impact. They take Fleming. Obviously, Fleming is now giving them 6 culture per turn, so actually a little bit more than Marlena is giving me. And it's going to give an extra +12 bonus to the Hollywood as well. Sazmer now develops the strategy to get some more draws in, and actually becomes stronger than me, maybe a bit playing around an impact of strength if this was in this deck. And they just finish upgrading their theaters. And they take a civil service. Maybe they could have taken a revolutionary idea, because that could have potentially let them play the fundamentalism next turn, and thus building even more urban buildings. However, I guess there's no point in doing this, because the game is going to end after this turn cycle, and they're going to have to put most of their resources into the Hollywood regardless. It's my turn. I do see that Impact of Strength because I'm pretty confident I'll be able to win it. And I reveal an Impact of Variety that Sazmo had seeded. It's also relatively even. Unfortunately, while I had gotten lucky, definitely in several ways in this game, especially in all the bonus cards I drew, I do get pretty unlucky here, where the internet is not revealed until the internet is going to be one of the last 2 cards in the deck. And the reason that's particularly unfortunate is because Sazmo, thanks to the architecture, will be able to finish the Hollywood in 1 civil action on their turn, and can then cut the internet from me, thus denying me the ability to finish the internet. And when this happened, I realized my mistake earlier in passing up the multimedia, because recall I said, I passed it up because I felt that it was almost impossible for Sazmo to catch up to me peacefully. But we can see here that almost impossible is definitely not impossible, because this is precisely the situation that needs to happen for Sazmo to catch up peacefully, which is Sazmo gets this really powerful wonder, and I do not get. The internet, is not as good as Hollywood, but it still would get me... How much culture would the internet get me? It would get me 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 22, 24, it would get me 28, probably more like 30 culture or something like that, which would be enough to solidify my win even after Sazmo gets Hollywood. But with Sazmo getting Hollywood and me not getting internet, that's when things start to get really dicey. So when internet was not revealed here, I was starting to worry, wow, could I actually lose this game despite having been in such a powerful culture lead through most of the end of Age 2 and most of Age 3. So, the entirety of Age 3. So I was starting to worry a little bit there. There is, of course, not really anything I can do with that other than, try to push culture as much as I can, building this library. What I decided to do, because I thought, it was very likely Sazmo was going to cut the internet, so what I was instead decided to aim for is the Red Cross. I can't finish the Red Cross, obviously, but Red Cross is the only Age 3 wonder where you don't have to finish it to get culture from it. So I was planning to take it and, get as much culture from it as I can. To do that, I can take both of these copies of reserves, planning to use them for food. Elsewise, I decided to play the rockets. I'm probably going to have to build one. I'm going to have to build something, a unit in order to get stronger than Sazmo for that Impact of Strength I seeded. So I might as well just play the rockets now. I'm not going to be playing any other techs. And I play the Revolution idea mainly just to get it out of my hand. I wasn't, almost certainly wasn't going to need the military buildup. I mean, Sazmo is going to spend 16 rocks on the Hollywood, so I only have 8 rocks left. I mean, all these military techs are going to be discarded, so I figured that I definitely didn't need this military buildup in order to get past Sazmo's strength, so I preferred just to, be more civil action efficient, get this card out of my hand. Doesn't really matter what I did there, I guess. And I draw, unfortunately, no impacts. Age 4 begins. Maybe one thing I could have done this turn, in retrospect, again, I played a little quickly, is instead of building that library, what I could have done is built a rockets this turn. I don't have a free population, but I could have destroyed a mine to build that rockets. I don't really need that many rocks. And by building a rockets and playing the tactic, I would go up to, let's see, 15, 25 strength, and that might have put pressure on Sazmo as vulnerable to an aggression. Sazmo really wants to finish Hollywood and probably cut internet, so maybe what I could have done is threaten Sazmo to have to get a little bit more strength in order to avoid an aggression from me, and maybe Sazmo can't do that, or if they can, then they can't cut internet, perhaps. So that's not a line that I considered. The downside of that, of course, is it meant I would have only gotten 1 draw anyway, and I was kind of hoping to draw a good impact. I didn't draw an impact anyway. That's retroactive bias, but maybe there wasn't really... I didn't go through the impacts to see which ones would have been good for me, something I should have done, but I could have, and probably most of them aren't good for me regardless, so it would have just been better to threaten aggressions against Sazmo to either force them to respond, or if they didn't, maybe I would be able to get an armed intervention off on them. So that was definitely a mistake on my end, I think, in retrospect. Anyway, Sazmo seeds, reveals my Impact of Happiness. This is at least a good impact for me, gives me 10 culture against Sazmo. And Sazmo, as expected, cuts the internet from me, and then just builds a temple for 1 extra culture. And we can see the Hollywood gives them 54 culture. Quite a lot.
I can't seed, so the way I can maximize my culture is I can, like I said, take the Red Cross, play reserves play 1 reserves for food. That lets me build 2 stages of the Red Cross to get me 12 culture. Obviously, 12 is a lot less than 54, but it's also a lot more than 0, and I don't have a better way to get culture. In order to win that Impact of Strength I seeded, I did need to destroy one of my mines to build the rockets. I could have played reserve for food and increased my population instead, but I thought that it was much more likely that this 6 extra culture I could get from the endowment would be more than, what could I lose from this? Pretty much just impact of industry, right? So, yeah. So, even if impact of industry is in the deck, playing this endowment of the arts gives me more culture than the extra 2 I would get. So, anyway, the point is, yeah, I played this turn away to build the Red Cross, to win the Impact of Strength, and to play the Endowment of the Arts to maximize my culture as much as possible. And so before the final impacts, we can see that, again, even though I had been so far in the culture lead through all of Age 3, because of the massive difference in value of the wonders that each of us built, Sazmar is now caught up really significantly. I am, in fact, only 18 points ahead of Sazmar, and there are 4 impacts. One of them is my Impact of Strength, so that'll give me 10 more, but the others are seeded by Sazmar. So I was kind of nervous heading into these impacts. The first one that was revealed was my Impact of Strength, so now that gives me a bit of a cushion against Sazmar. I am now 28 points above them. The next, though, was a good impact for Sazmar. Impact of Balance, that gives them 4 against me. I am now only 24 ahead. The next one is a really good impact for Sazmar because I only have 2 units in my military, so this makes an additional 8 against me. I am now only 16 culture ahead. That being said, 16 seemed like it should be more than the other impact could be. The next one is a really good one for Sazmar, an Impact of Progress that gives them 10, but 10 culture against me is not enough to win, and I end up winning by a relatively slim margin of only 6 points. So I definitely made some mistakes in this game, and I think I pointed out those mistakes as I made them, so I won't go into too much more detail on this. I definitely played this game faster than I could have, for reasons already stated. I think on Sazmar's end, Sazmar definitely was in a potential position to win. I mean, they only lost by 6, so it was really close. I think that the 4th mine did certainly end up providing a fair amount of value to Sazmar. Maybe it could have provided more value going in other places, though. I feel that Sazmar just specifically didn't prioritize the printing presses enough. I think if Sazmar, and I think those early turns, if Sazmar had taken Boudica instead of Hippocrates, and had maybe elected Hippocrates earlier, Boudica could have given Sazmar science, Sazmar could have delayed that lab like I did, and instead built printing presses. Then, even if I myself had played better, I think Sazmar would have been in a better position to win than they ended up being. But Sazmar did definitely find the one line that could have let them catch up to me in culture. So while I do have some criticisms of how Sazmar played, especially in Age 1, I think Sazmar played Age 3 extremely well. And if a few things had gone a bit differently, like if Sazmar had gotten Marlena and not me, Sazmar could certainly have won this game. But they didn't, thankfully for me. And we can take a quick look at the standings. So here are the live group standings. We can see that that was actually the last 2-player game Sazmar was playing. So Sazmar has finished all of their games now. They won both of their 2-player games that went against me. Here we can see that they beat Cleveman by a lot, over 60 points, and Fatop actually resigned against them. So that felt pretty good. It looks like Sazmar, maybe 2-player is their best format, which wouldn't surprise me if so, because Sazmar in the 3- and 4-player games too pushed culture pretty hard throughout those. So I think Sazmar's natural playstyle of pushing culture is definitely best in a 2-player game. So that made me feel a bit better. That makes me feel better too that, this game ended up being close. I do think Sazmar, definitely, like I said, is definitely good at 2-player games, as we saw here and from the results of these. Anyway, though, as stated before, I'm still, winning the group no matter what, but I am now closer to getting potentially even a perfect record of 39 points, which would, I think, even in round 2, as we saw in the beginning, like, all of my opponents, I think, are pretty good. We've seen in my games that all of my opponents are good.
And so being able to get first in all of my games against them, even though some of them certainly required some fortunate luck for me, is still would be an impressive achievement. So I'm kind of aiming to get that, and also, you know, for the other reasons previously stated. We'll see whether I can do it. I can say that right now my game against Cleveland just started age 3 or so. My game against Fat Hope is taking a bit longer. I think our time zones don't match up. So we'll see when I'm able to post those videos. Planning to do them, you know, relatively soon. If the games don't end that soon, I do have some other ideas for videos I can publish. I've published videos at a pretty quick pace right now. I'm not gonna publish every day, certainly, for much longer. I think I almost certainly, you know, I almost certainly won't post another video tomorrow. But I do have ideas for other videos to make, so you can look forward to those. In the meantime, though, as always, please let me know if you have any comments or constructive criticism on either my gameplay or my video making. I want to improve a lot on both ends. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.